I am Christian Holz from the Citizens Energy Cooperative Rhein-Sieg. We are based in Siegburg, Bonn, and come from Germany. What is important when we start a project, or rather when we want to implement a project, is that we need money. Our cooperative members give us a loan, and with this money, we then finance these projects. In this context, it is important that the members of our cooperative have confidence in our calculations. They entrust us with their money, and therefore they also want us to handle their financial resources carefully. The question is, what do we have to take into consideration? And that of course varies greatly from one project to another, because the framework conditions are very different. Firstly, how big is the roof? What surface area do we have available, and how much photovoltaics can we put on this roof? A secondary aspect here is, of course, as we have already mentioned, that the highest possible self-consumption is currently the criterion for operating a system economically. In general, the fluctuation range is very large. The range is from 800 euros to 1,300 euros per kilowatt peak, and that depends, for example, on whether the system has to be integrated into an existing building, into a fire alarm system, or whether other additional aspects have to be considered, which then increase the costs per kilowatt peak. Another point is that we have to take into consideration occupational health and safety. Here, for example, we have to consider the installation of fixed points during the assembly of the plant or any scaffolding that may be necessary. You can't put a percentage figure on these costs. You really have to look at each individual case. Do I need scaffolding? How big is it? How long do I need it? And these costs have to be investigated individually. The same applies if I need to attach additional fixed points to the roof. Again, it can only be decided individually. With regard to the costs, it is again important to consider the running costs that you will incur. On the one hand, there is insurance, where you can work well with percentages to include in the calculation, as well as the costs for maintenance. Here too, you can calculate a percentage amount per kilowatt peak. The costs are on one side, the revenue is on the other. On the revenue side, as I just said, you have to look at how it is with self-consumption, because the costs per kilowatt hour produced are relatively profitable. That has a positive effect on my income, because that's money I no longer have to spend through electricity purchases. To this, I still have income from the surplus feed-in. This means that I feed what I can't use directly in my building into the grid and receive a much lower payment for it. However, I also have to consider this on my income side. To summarize again, on the one hand, I have the electricity income from my own use of the electricity produced. Then I have the income from the electricity that I feed back into the public grid and receive remuneration for it, or, in states where it is possible, I can also sell this surplus electricity to my neighbors, and then have the corresponding income there as well. The balance of both the cost side and the income side, from this I can then derive how economical this project is, and then I can consider whether I finance it. For example, through loans from my cooperative. The cooperative members or whether I take in money from banks and then finance this project through these loan agreements. If possible, I also have the option of financing part of the projects through the equity of our cooperative. Here too, I have to look at how a good mix can best reflect economic viability and make it feasible. When it comes to raising funds from our cooperative members or from a bank, it is of course important to present the key economic data in a coherent way. For this purpose, we prepare a presentation in which we show the expected costs for the project. We then compare the expected income of the new plant in relation to this and provide an overview with figures from simulation programs. These are then sent to the members in the form of a presentation or sent to the corresponding financing banks so that they can get a first impression and can then decide whether they want to participate in the project. In case of queries, we from the Citizens Energy Cooperative are of course available for our members, as well as for the participating banks if they are involved, to answer questions decisively and to share the information that may still be needed. As a cooperative, we are of course also interested in accepting new members. Now the question arises, what are the advantages, what are my duties in a cooperative, and how do I get into a cooperative? First of all, what are my duties as a member of a cooperative? First of all, I have to buy a cooperative share. In our cooperative, I can only buy one cooperative share, and this share costs €250. This is in effect my entrance ticket to all further activities. What do I get from a cooperative? As a member of the cooperative, I can support it in the implementation of energy transition by creating and realizing new projects. This works in such a way as already mentioned that we, the cooperative board, evaluate a new project and decide to offer it to our members. We present this in the form of a newsletter or a presentation and give the members the key data. Now every member has the possibility to decide for themselves if they want to support this project or not. It is not obligatory. It is an extra option that I have as a member of the cooperative. I am also free to decide how much I want to invest. And here I simply have to evaluate my private circumstances and make a decision. It is so that I also get something out of supporting a project. Let's assume I give €1,000 to support a project. I have already been told in the prospectus how long the loan will run, and that can be quite different each time, depending on the size of the plant, on the expected yield. Let's assume that this plant would be financed for 10 years, so the credit agreement would then run for 10 years. I have my €1,000, and I would also be told how much interest I can expect. With the loan, I get paid my interest every year. For example, 2% interest per year, always from the amount I have deposited as a loan. That means in the first year, I get 2% of my 1,000 euros paid out after 1 year, after 12 months. The first 2 years are usually repayment-free. That means I don't get anything back from the money I put in. In the third year, and this is also shown in this prospectus for the new project, it is then determined how much I will get back from my invested money from the third year onwards. That means that from the third year onwards, I will not only get back my interest, but also a small amount of the original 1,000 euros. Of course, this also means that in the fourth year, I will no longer receive the interest from my 1,000 euros, but only from what I have not yet received back. Let's say 950 euros. This means that my 2% will be calculated from this 950 euros and paid back to me in the fourth year or transferred into my bank account. And I will also receive another small amount of my 1,000 euros as repayment. At the end of the 10 years, I will have received my entire invested capital back and, in addition, my 2% interest over the 10 years. In Germany, we still have this in a special construct, a so-called subordinated loan. It is a normal loan, but if insolvency should occur, I am at the very end of the chain of creditors. But it has to be said that a cooperative is also monitored and controlled by the cooperative association. And it has never happened in Germany that a cooperative has gone bankrupt. So the capital is relatively safely invested. Before we go into the financial and calculative side of a project, there is one more thing to consider. This is not so much associated with costs, but is rather a time problem. In other words, you have to plan time into the project. I'll now show you how we can take an economic view of a new project. What can I give you for the successful implementation of a project? Be creative in terms of involving your suppliers, solar installers, roofers, and so on. Be creative when it comes to financing, when it comes to profitability, but be careful. You want to be successful in the long term. You want to invest your members' money safely, so safety first. Otherwise, good luck and have fun with your projects.
Viel Erfolg und viel Spaß mit euren Projekten.